Hi, this is Bharti, and we are here at Spinnaker Summit in San Diego. And today we have with us Ben Mappen. You're a co-founder of Armory. So first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. So I want to understand why and when you started Armory with all your colleagues and friends. What problem you saw in the market that you guys were trying to solve?
Yeah. So we started Armory about 3.5 years ago. Myself and my other co-founders, Drodio and Isaac, we worked together at a previous company. So we didn't come from Netflix or Google. We at that company had very acute pain points around software deployments. In fact, we couldn't even deploy our own corporate website, which was quite embarrassing at the time. We identified this problem, which was good, and we made a very focused effort to solve it internally. So we took 6 months where we shut off all of product development just so we could focus on rebuilding our infrastructure. Now, this was at a time when Spinnaker was not open source yet, so we had no choice but to build it ourselves. The output or the result of that work was a tremendous amount of deployment velocity. So before we started the project, we were doing about 5 deployments per month, which was okay. But after the project was done, we had full CI/CD. So an engineer, they check in their code, and it goes straight to production without any human intervention. And what we got to was about 2,000, 2,500 deployments every month. And this was a relatively small engineering team as well, which was so very impressive growth. Now, what you might expect from that experience, like, engineers were happy. I was a product manager there. I was very happy. I'm able to launch new features and test them with customers very fast. So all those things were good. What surprised us was that CD, something that is really an engineering type of thing or known as an engineering process, had a huge effect on the company at large. So it affected boardroom strategy. So what I mean is, because we were able to move fast, we were able to start innovating much faster, and we actually found a new product idea that we were able to then launch only because of the velocity that we had. And that company ended up pivoting the entire business from an older legacy business model, which was generating a ton of revenue, to this new business model. And now the company is still on that path, and they shut down the old thing. So that was really inspirational to us, and that's what led us to say, hey, well, we experienced this pain point, we solved it with CD, and it really had a big impact on the company. Do other companies have similar problems? And if so, can we help them solve it? Not just CD, but can we help other companies innovate faster? So that was kind of the genesis of us wanting to do something. What happened next was we said, we think that there's something here, but how do we go and validate this in the market? So we ended up talking to 126 different companies. We interviewed DevOps engineers, we interviewed VPs, director level folks, just to try to understand, how do you deploy your software today? What's painful? How long does it take? If it is painful, then are you trying to solve this pain point now? Are you willing to spend money to solve it? Or how are you resourcing? And what's the relative priority for solving this problem? And what we learned is that, yes, it's a very intense pain point for many companies, both mostly larger companies. And it's something that they were actively trying to solve. But they didn't have a good solution for it. So kind of like in parallel with us learning about the market problems, Drodio and Isaac actually know Andy Glover from their time in DC. So we were having dinner with Andy. Andy tells us about, hey, we're working on this thing, Spinnaker, and we're open sourcing it with Google. And we thought, hey, this might be a really great way to go to market. The other thing that we're thinking is, oh, well, we just finished rebuilding all this from scratch. It would have been nicer to have Spinnaker so we didn't have to do that. But we saw it as a kind of first mover advantage. We can try to commercialize this open source project that's brand new.
Right. And now I think Spinnaker was contributed to Linux Foundation as a project, as the process.
Yes.
So now it's no longer a company-driven project. I mean, it was still an open source project, but now it's being developed and created by a community, larger community,
Yes.
with the governance model and everything that is coming in the pipeline. How does that affect the project itself? Because when you look at Armory, you guys are trying to solve a specific problem.
Yep.
When you put a project into a community, then a lot of people are looking at their own problems. So how does this change the equation of a project when you put it in an open source?
That's a really good question. So what we're seeing, actually let me back up for a second. So before it went into the Linux Foundation, actually within the Linux Foundation there are, I guess, child organizations. The CNCF is one of those, and Kubernetes and many other projects are kind of groomed in the CNCF. A brand new child organization to the Linux Foundation was created just for CD. It's called CDF, Continuous Delivery Foundation. Spinnaker is one of 4 projects in there. So to answer your question directly, what changes? It's really validating. It validates the project. Having the support and the community of the Linux Foundation, we believe kind of puts that stamp of approval on Spinnaker, like it's real, it's here to stay, and we do have the support of that entire organization. So we've seen tremendous growth since that launch, and it just means the community is growing faster. They actually, in order to be a member, you pay dues. They use that money for marketing events. They use that money to promote the projects that are housed underneath.
So if you look at Spinnaker today, as you said, the adoption is growing. So how differently Spinnaker did things as compared to the traditional CI/CD pipelines that where customers saw that, hey, this is how we should be solved. I mean, there's a lot of reasons. One is that everybody was writing their own script. They were doing a lot of patchwork. They were wasting a lot of resources internally. Every company was doing that. Now they can just take a Spinnaker and put that engineering efforts towards actual innovation. That is one factor. Are there anything else, or what did you see that Spinnaker changed?
So I think there's 2 really important things that you get with Spinnaker that are benefits to using it, and have led to its success to date. The first is that it came out of Netflix, and in conjunction with Google open sourcing it. These are 2 companies that are widely known to have great cloud practices, have really learned over the last decade all of the things, like what are all of those best practices when you are developing software, when you want to deploy to ephemeral environments like public cloud, and those lessons are codified in the tool itself. So if you are some enterprise company that is having pain points around software deployments, a natural place to look is, hey, Netflix uses this, Google uses this, look at this community. You kind of just have that brand recognition and trust to at least try it. So that's great. The next big benefit that you get with Spinnaker that other tools, you don't really have this, is the community. So engineers from Netflix, engineers from Google, from Microsoft, from Pivotal, and of course Armory as well, are filling in the integration gaps. So what I mean is, if you don't have Spinnaker, every company that is building software has a way to deploy it to a production environment, but that mechanism to get the code from point A to point B is driven by scripts or some other tool that they built internally and they have to maintain. With Spinnaker, the community is building those scripts. I mean, the scripts don't go away. You still need code to orchestrate getting an artifact from here into a data center or into a production environment. But the community maintains those roads for you, so you don't have to do it. And all of that code that you had written, probably from an engineer that maybe wrote it years ago and no one knows how it works. Maybe the engineer is on vacation. Maybe they leave the company, and now you're stuck with this system, which is brittle. The other important thing there to note is that the underlying deployment targets, so in this case it's AWS, GCP, Azure, they're changing so rapidly. Like AWS launches hundreds of features every single year. So you would have to hire an army of engineers internally to keep pace with that. Whereas in a situation with an open source community, the community is maintaining those integrations for you. So you don't have to maintain that yourself. You can just focus on business value for your company.
Yeah, and that's how open source work. Instead of hiring all those 100 engineers, you're actually competitors' engineers are working on the very product that you are using internally.
Exactly. So, it's massive leverage.
Right. And then you are not, just limited to your own engineers.
Yep.
So the best of the breed in engineers are working on that. So
Yeah.
So when I look at the Spinnaker ecosystem, there are three players. Of course, there are the creators like Netflix and Google, and now that community is also growing. A lot of companies like Armory, you guys are contributing. But then there is second category where is vendors. You are distributing Spinnaker, and then there are open source users who take the open source code base.
Yep.
And so you guys are at a critical juncture, because you face actual problem that paying customers are facing, and you have to solve those problems. So can you talk about, first of all, what kind of customers are there who are using Spinnaker, why they came to Spinnaker, what they saw that they chose it, and what kind of problems they continue to face that pushes you guys to continue to iterate and innovate?
Yeah. The first thing I'll mention is just something around the community, which is in order to have a healthy community, you need companies like Armory, also OpsumX, even Google to some extent, companies that have a commercial interest in the project in order to solve real customer pain points. So most of the customers that we work with are tend to be larger enterprise companies with hundreds or even thousands of engineers. The trigger for them to seek out a solution like Spinnaker and then reach out to Armory is usually some type of change in deployment target. So we call this a cloud migration. That could be either from a data center into AWS or GCP, or it could even be within a cloud. So you might have a company that's running a lot of workloads on EC2, and then they say, oh, we want to containerize everything and we want to move to EKS or run Kubernetes on top of EC2. But the reason why that is the trigger is because when you work at a big company, you are bound by certain standards around security, also compliance, like things like SOC 2, ISO, FedRAMP. These things are very important when you become larger. And those I guess rules or policies need to be baked into whatever deployment solution you have. So historically, they have a custom solution. They ensure they have a security team, they have a compliance team, and those teams ensure that whatever solution that they built themselves adheres to those policies. Now, for another reason completely, they say, oh, we want to move to Kubernetes, or we want to move to the cloud. They have to then rebuild all of that security, safety, compliance into a new solution. So whatever existing solution they had, you kind of have to throw it away to some extent because you have to rebuild those safety, security, and compliance again. Now with Spinnaker, you're getting those things out of the box. You're getting safe deployments, you're getting secure deployments, and in terms of compliance, there's a lot of functionality within Spinnaker that allows you to adhere to those compliance policies. So that's really the trigger. That's why they reach out initially.
Before we wrap this up, I have a question about that. If you look at today's world, Kubernetes is kind of becoming, engine, of everything. How do you see? And Kubernetes and Spinnaker also work together, of course.
Yep,
Google
very well.
is involved there, but there is a SIG for Spinnaker and Kubernetes as well.
Yep.
How do you see the evolution of Spinnaker in parallel, in conjunction to Kubernetes? Because a lot of your customers are also Kubernetes users.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of your Kubernetes users are looking at using Spinnaker.
Yeah. I mean, Kubernetes is quickly becoming ubiquitous in the market. 3 years ago, that we weren't really sure. You had Docker Swarm, you had Mesos, you have Kubernetes, of course, and Nomad and some others. And now, very clearly, Kubernetes is one. Kubernetes is we see it as the gold standard in terms of high growth open source projects, which we hope to replicate with Spinnaker. We think Spinnaker is a couple years behind Kubernetes in terms of adoption and growth, but the good news is it is on a very similar trajectory in terms of the classic community metrics that you might look at, contributorship, GitHub stars, enterprise adoption, just success stories. These are all things that we track inside Armory religiously because we are drafting on the backs of this Spinnaker open source community. So you look at the universe of potential customers for us. We want Spinnaker to be everywhere. And if Spinnaker is everywhere, then that means that Armory is probably also doing really well as well.
Perfect. That makes perfect sense. Ben, thank you once again for talking to me today. And since Spinnaker is going to play a very major role, so I'm pretty sure that we'll be talking soon at some point. So, but anyway, thank you once again.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.